Welcome back, viewers. I'm Frederick Noronha, and this is our program Literary Goa, where we introduce you to the people writing books and much more about Goa. Today, we have with us a very interesting guest, Angela Barreto Xavier, who is a professor in Lisbon, and she has written at least 5 books related to Goa. Apart from that, in the last year or two, she was in the news big time for winning the Infosys award, one of the 6 Infosys awards given by the Infosys group in Bangalore, and the only one which is on a non-technical field, which is worth quite a lot of money. And apart from that, it's very prestigious. So, Angela, tell us about your idea of Goa. I know you're best known for your PhD thesis, which was later a Portuguese book called The Idea of Goa.
Yeah. Okay. Which is my idea of Goa? It is a difficult question because, in fact, I think there are many Goas, not only one Goa. My PhD thesis and becoming a book called Invention Goa is mainly about the region of Tisvadi, Chorão, Devar, Bardej, and Salsete, which is the part that was submitted to the Portuguese rule for a longer period. But the same argument that I apply for these parts of Goa, I could not apply them to what we call the new conquests, all the rest that had been integrated in the second half of the 18th century, because the way the Portuguese ruled that part was quite different from the parts that I was studying. So I don't have one idea of Goa because I think that Goa now it's a state, but there are many different layers in this state and many different histories also because of these different presences of the Portuguese.
So if I get the point right, you are saying that Goa is made up of many different parts, taken on at many different points of time, acquired in many different ways, and with different Portuguese rules, form of rule. Therefore, they have different kind of impacts here.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, because we have to see it as a process. I try to see history as a process, not as something that it started like this and then it was always the same. And the ways the Portuguese people were thinking in the 16th century are very different from the ways they were thinking about their political culture in the second half of the 18th century when the new conquests were annexed or conquered. It's very, very different. And religion played a very different role in the Portuguese rule in these two periods.
So it's a very interesting thing what you're saying, because we like to believe that we Goans are one and we all one. And there's kind of thing, we have this myth of nation building, region building, whatever you want to call it today. But obviously there's a lot of weight in what you say. We'll come back to that later. To start at the beginning, you were born in Goa.
Yes.
And you went to Portugal as a young kid.
Very young kid.
And how did you take to studying Goa? Did it come naturally to you, or did it come at a later stage? How did you take to the history of Goa in such a deep way?
Oh yeah, it was in a later stage. I wanted to work on colonial history for a long time. And then I thought, why not working or starting working about Goa? But was because I was interested in some problems, in the sense that historians can be a historian of a region or can be historians that work on some subjects. And I like to think of myself, even if my work is always associated to Goa, as a historian that is interested in some problems. And my problems are related with the governance of different people, what I call the governance of otherness, or of the government of difference. So I've always been interested on that subject, even when I was not working on Goa. And then I decided that colonial history was one of the best places to understand the ways how power rules difference, because precisely of interacting with different societies and all the complexity that involves. And so since I had connections to India, I thought, Goa, and not only because of that, also because Goa was a kind, I like to say it, a kind of experimental laboratory for the Portuguese imperial rule, because it was conquered very early, and then the Portuguese were trying some understandings of empire here in Goa that it could work out or not. We know that it didn't work out in many different places, but this was a kind of there was a kind of designing, of a way of ruling experienced here. So Goa has these many different interests for me. One is biographical, obviously, but the other is completely related with its own history, and that's nothing to do with my own biography. Its relevance to understand the Portuguese imperial rule elsewhere also.
Goa is very unique in that sense because it has this long period of colonial rule, and it went through many stages, and it started even before the French and the Danes and the British and a lot of others came about. So it's quite unique. But you when you left Goa, you went at the age of
3.
3.
3 years.
So from your school days, you had this interest in Goa, or it was like a forgotten chapter which?
No. I mean, I didn't have in that sense academic sense until I was at university.
I see.
But in my place, Goa was also always present. My parents are Goans, and so Goa was always in our minds. We came very frequently back to Goa. So still today, when I think about my home place, I think about the house of my aunts in Margão. Yes. So there is this deep feeling inside me that didn't disappear with my long life in Portugal.
The reason I asked this question was I was talking to Sandra Ataide Lobo, who is also another Goan in Portugal, and she said that for a long time she was resistant to this idea of working on Goa, and her dad, George Ataide Lobo, and Nuno Gonçalves, the famous collector of Goa books, would tell her to work on it, and finally it came like an awakening that she had to work on it, and she's done a lot of work herself too. But tell us about your thesis, The Invention of Goa, in Portuguese, Invenção de Goa, how do you pronounce it?
Yes, Invenção de Goa, how it came about. Actually, it came the way it is now, because my original project was about Goa, but it was not that project, because my supervisor, Professor Kirti Chowdhury, an important Indian scholar, he was one time, when we were discussing a chapter of the older thesis, he made me a question that I had never asked myself, which was this basic question: who are you? And I was like puzzled. Why is he asking me that? And then he was saying that Goans were different from Anglo-Indians, because he was brought up in an Anglo-Indian setting. Yeah. And he was saying, I feel Goans as different from Anglo-Indians. And I wonder why this happens. And I was puzzled by that question. I was with 24 years old at that time, and I was wondering why I don't ask myself that question. And that question became a kind of starting point for me. Why certain people that were brought up, that were Goans, or certain families, don't need to ask themselves that identity questions. And so I was, that started all the process of understanding what happened to have this output, that some families feel well in Portugal, don't ask what they are, but also they feel well in Goa, and they also don't need to ask what they are. So this was really the reason why my initial project twisted and tried to solve this question of knowing why certain people in old conquests, because I'm sure that this doesn't happen in the new conquests as much. Why certain people really don't have that problem, that question in their minds. Yeah. Well, at least at that time. Now I don't know
they say that Rome was not built in a day, and someone pointed out that the time it took to build Rome, the time it took to create the current day boundaries of Goa was much more than that time to build Rome. Like, I think yes. It's some 250 years or something like that.
Definitely.
And is it true that the new conquests were not even conquests in that sense, were handed over by treaty to
Yes. I mean, there were conquests, but they were not all conquered. And then there was a kind of peace treaties in order to solve the problem. So, yes, they were mostly annexed by treaty.
And your other books?
My other books. Okay, so an invention on Goa is somehow the main. Well, it's I don't know if it's the best known book. Together now with Catholic Orientalism that I co-authored with Inês Supanov, with well, a scholar that I really admire very, very much.
Yeah, of course, Dr. Zupanov is Croatian and she has been studying Goa and she's done a lot of work and you all have both worked well together. But in brief, what's the thesis of Catholic Orientalism?
Catholic Orientalism is mainly about the production of knowledge on India, Goa, but not only Goa, in the context of Catholic empires. And it's a book that dialogues, communicates directly with the classical Orientalisms. Because as we know, British and French Orientalists from the end of the 18th century onwards, they are considered the Orientalism. And there is this idea also that they are a kind of science and they are secular Orientalisms. So, and the knowledge produced in the context of Catholic empires, not only Portuguese Empire, but also French Empire, it was not exactly knowledge because it was framed by theological interests and all that stuff. Well, what we realized was that some of the knowledge produced in the context of these Catholic empires was just flew to the books written by French and British Orientalists.
It was just taken over and incorporated and pirated and...
Yes, but you know, at that time the sense of authorship was completely different. So in that sense, they were not...
It was just borrowing.
Yes, they were borrowing, they were not giving credit, but at the same time there was this irony because they were saying, somehow there was this belief that knowledge is not a good knowledge, but on the other hand, that knowledge was there, you know? Yeah. So we were like discussing this. First, what type of knowledge was produced in the context of these Catholic empires, and on the other hand, showing that the same problems that British Orientalists, for example, in India, had in the 19th century, the same questions, they were already present in the Catholic rules present in India, like in the 16th century. People wanted to know about agriculture, about nature, about counting people, what types of people, about religion, caste. It's also a very interesting question because from my work, what I came to understand is that what the British understood of caste in the 19th century was really very different from what was the experience in Goa, at least in the 16th century. Because from my understanding, from the data I gathered, caste in Goa in 16th century was much more flexible, less rigid, less ruled than it became later on. So it was, again, a process of rigidification that was happening. It also happened under the Portuguese rule. But in the 16th century, there was more mobility and namely less preeminence of the Brahmins that became later on known as the dominant caste, yes. And so that is also very interesting because sometimes we use these theories that have been produced in later centuries and then
juxtapose it back to the earlier centuries.
Yes, and then bring them to understand the earlier centuries. And sometimes that really doesn't work. Doesn't work because they were produced in a different historical context. And like history is ever changing. It's not a process that is rigid, as I was saying before. So that's also interesting in what concerns the research on Goa, because it goes back to such an earlier period that allows us to make questions about things that have been produced later. You know,
the work that you and Zupanov have been doing, Professor Zupanov have been doing, is really insightful. In the sense that for the first time it's coming to the English-speaking world and it has not been accessible all this time. When it comes to studying South Asia, it's mostly British influenced scholarship that is looked at. Is it language? Is it the fact that this is a different point of history, or what, a mix of all these reasons that the Portuguese or French understanding of India doesn't get studied?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think language is surely a good reason, but I would say that's a question of scale. because in the end the Portuguese were present in very little places. It's true that they were present for a long time.
But with a big impact also.
Yes, but with a big impact, but
small places.
But small places. While the British
were all over.
Yes, and so it's that is one reason. Second reason, I would say the chronology of the British presence, because the type of documents that have been produced, the amount of documents that have been produced, and etc., allows to do a lot of easier research. I'm not criticizing, obviously, people that are doing this research, but it's easier to do it. Yeah. While when you go to 16th century documents that are dispersed in many archives with different scripts and different languages, difficult scripts.
Difficult forms of the language.
Yes, then it becomes, and many of them destroyed, as it happens unfortunately in the archive of Goa. Then it becomes really more difficult. That's, I would say, that is one thing. The other thing is that the dominance of the Anglo-Saxonic world, no? Like America, Britain, in the academia. So I think that's also an important reason that they produce, and it's normal. I mean, they study what it's interesting for them to study in a way. More interesting. And the Portuguese authors, but also Goan authors that were writing in English, somehow they didn't get into this international stage of discussion and debate on empires. And the Portuguese empire was, for a long time, considered a less empire. I think that people like Sanjay Subramaniam helped to put the Portuguese Empire in the world stage, and that made it easier to people to get interested.
In English?
Yes, in English.
With his books on Vasco da Gama.
Yes. No, yes, you have to write it in English, because otherwise you are read by, I mean, Portuguese language is 5th, I think, in the world, so it can be read by many people, and Brazilians, and in Africa, and so ever. But
in pockets, they are big pockets, but they are pockets.
Yes, but they are still pockets.
Yes.
Exactly. So the reach, there is a global reach of the things written in English. So that's why also this invention de Goa has been translated into English.
What would you define as your research interest, Doctor?
I don't know if I understood well your question.
What are the topics of your research? Colonialism, governance
of difference, the impact of politics and culture in the making of societies. I like to think myself as a political and cultural historian. Even some people call me social historian, but actually what I'm interested in is understanding how power and culture really helped shaping society. So
the history of Goa is very contentious, particularly now where it's seen through religious lenses often. And sometimes old issues are given new political twists and things like that. So, I know you're studying issues like conversions and the politics of it, and it's a controversial issue, and sometimes it can be misused and misread also. So what's your thinking on that?
Yes, I know, and I also know that my work can be misused because of things that I say in my work, and I hope it's not misused and that people read it as with all the complexity it has, because the point of misusing is just taking some parts and giving it a new explanation. I know that, and what I'm trying to do in my books is to show that everybody is responsible for historical processes. And I cannot accept, I don't know, maybe because I'm from Goan origin, that Goans are only victims. I cannot accept that, because that is to take the agency of the people here. It's just to say, oh, they were such miserable people that became the bad ones and they did everything and destroyed them. I don't see it that way. I don't see. And my interest in politics helps me also to think that, and that's my conviction. I'm not saying that I'm right, because I know other people have different opinions on this. But I don't understand, I don't agree, I don't believe that any authoritarian power, and if we can think that empire is an authoritarian power,
can carry on for so long.
Can carry on for so long if there is
no local complicity.
Yeah,
Or
I
buy-in,
cannot.
or buy-in.
I cannot believe that, and that for me that is an historical fact in the 16th century as it is today. Actually,
Whether in Portuguese Goa, British India, a whole lot of other
yes,
empires.
and because there are always people that for different reasons, they don't have to be the same reasons for every people, can find interesting some situations brought up by the new role.
Yeah.
Yes, and I try to show that in my book about Goa, that poor people could be there an opportunity to overcome some caste problems, like the poorest ones.
You also mentioned that before colonialism came, this idea that Goa was a golden place and all was not necessarily true in that sense.
Yes, I do not believe that it was. I think that was lots of conflict on one hand inside the villages. This idea that the villages were harmonious places and so on. I think it's not fair. It's not fair to people also, because different people have their own ways of living, and that is also a kind of orientalistic topic to say, oh, the village people are quiet, no progressive, they don't react, and this Indian topic on India, no, the Indians do not react and they are passive and all that stuff. That's not what I see in the documents. If you see documents from the 16th century, you see people from the villages petitioning all the time, trying to. It's not only today, it was that time. The Portuguese were complaining. They are always in the courts petitioning against us. And so you can see this agency of the villages in that period. So this idea that Goa was, and you also can see that people like from Bangladesh, they are somehow different from people from Salcete.
In what sense?
In the sense how the Gamcaries were organized, for example. And you can see that in the books of comunidades. Actually, we don't have books of comunidades, the livros das comunidades of Bangladesh. Unfortunately, we don't have for earlier periods. But for many documents, you can see that Bangladesh, it probably had some historical experiences that were different from Salcete because of the previous periods. Not because of the Portuguese period only, but because of the previous dominations that somehow the people that talk about Golden Goa tend to forget that there were previous dominations. Right. We know Bijapur but also Vijayanagar and previous, and all these are multiple layers that make Goa, but not make a Goa that is all equal, because some parts were sometimes under one domination, while other parts were under other dominations, and we know that these have impacts. Different impacts on the regions. So
your other books in Portuguese, what are they on, briefly?
Yeah, they are not exactly on Goa. Okay. Actually, I mean, many of them have parts that refer to Goa, but they are bigger topics. I wrote a small book on the year 1498, when Vasco da Gama arrived in India. And it's a book that tries to see that history from the point of view of the people of that time, because we know what happened afterwards.
Portuguese or Indian or both?
Yes, both, and also Africans, because we try. I do it with a colleague, Nonsense. We try to follow the trip of Vasco da Gama. He was stopping in many different places, before arriving in Calicut, and we try to see how the world was working in that period. And these people did not know that Vasco da Gama trip would have such a huge impact. So it was just another trip. It was not the trip like Columbus trip. Yeah. So we try to see it in that way, and in order to understand in that time how people were dealing with this trip, and in that sense taking a bit of the mythology around it. So
I read a book called The First Global Village by this popular journalist, actually.
Yes,
Martin Page. Page. And he says most of the writing about the Portuguese in English tends to be very critical of them. And on the other hand, till the 70s, till the 80s at least, we felt that Portuguese historians were not very critical of their own colonial past. Yes. But now things have changed a lot.
I think there are lots of people now in Portugal, historians, scholars working critically with in relation to the colonial past. But there is also a tension in public debate, because there are people Many people, I don't know if it's the majority of Portuguese,
Okay.
but probably yes, they,
More conservative point of view.
yes, they have this also golden legend about the Portuguese Empire. So then come these scholars, myself included, saying, oh no, this was not so golden nice, and just the contrary. And there are many problems and violence and all that stuff, and slavery, and they don't like it because, it's like when you come to Goa and say, yes, no, Goa in the past was not so wonderful and quiet and pleasant for everybody. And nationalist people will say they don't like it, no, because this is what they like to believe and to see themselves. With the Portuguese, it happens the same.
And we
so
get caught up somewhere in between, because at the current debate, the way the debate is going on in Goa and in the rest of India, we almost colonialism is connected with religion, and it gets mixed up, and you never know when old scores are going to be used to settle new political battles. And
yes,
so
it's very difficult to try to have a kind of, objectivity and to get distance from the debates without being misused in these debates. It is quite difficult, and I know that some people told me not to criticize or to my work, but saying, well, your work can be misused and fuel these debates.
But nonetheless, it's important work, and it has to be said. I mean, regardless of misuse or whatever, things have to be said. And as you mentioned, being truthful as a historian is very important. Tell us a little bit about your Infosys prize.
Oh, well, that was quite a surprise, that because we don't apply to these prizes. And so I didn't know that someone had nominated me or tell the people of the jury, that the committee, that my work was worth reading. And so when I was told by Mr. Narayana Murthy in an online meeting that, because I was really caught up, they asked me for a meeting, and I didn't know that he was there, to do something completely different. So I went for this meeting to organize a conference. That was what I was told about Goa. And then suddenly Mr. Narayana Murthy, that I did not know because I live in Portugal, and so I did not know his face, I could not recognize him, was telling me this, that I had got this prize. And I was really so shocked because I do my work, and I'm not being, it's not false modesty. I do my work with not to get prizes. I do my work as I think I should do it, with as honest as possible, because, and I'm quite aware that we cannot be completely objective. That does not exist. But you have to be aware that you cannot be completely objective to be as much objective as you can, So that's how I work. And so when someone tells me, oh yeah, but your work is really worth reading and it's so good that you deserve this fantastic prize, I was,
there was a lot of surprise and pleasant surprise in Goa, because one of our own had actually got it, so it was quite amazing.
Yeah, I'm also happy for that. Yes.
But as far as the issues which are not studied, very briefly, I want to ask you 3 brief questions.
Yes.
The issues that are not studied in Goa, the role of the Goan community in Portugal today, including your brother, and the state of the archives. I know you have strong feelings about the first and the third, especially.
Okay, the role of a Portuguese community in Portugal now. Well, you know that the Prime Minister is from Goan origin. I think that, I think there is a kind, I call it positive orientalism towards Goans in Portugal, which the Goans, they fabricated also this image about themselves. And there is about Goans in Portugal compared to people from other colonies, there is somehow a better idea, especially among educated Portuguese. They are welcoming Goans in general, and that obviously helps that people of Goan origin just do as other Portuguese people, that if they have merit or they are good enough, or they will thrive. thriving. That will not happen with black people in Portugal, African people, people of African origin, what is really bad. But that shows you how this perception of Goans is different in relation, for example, perception of people of African origin. So just recently we had a minister from African origin in Portugal. The lady, the Minister of Justice. But we had already many governants that were from Portuguese origin, including my brother. Yes.
Yeah.
So that
Your
was
brother was the Secretary of
State of Culture. Yes.
That's the equivalent of a minister.
Yeah, because at that moment there was no minister, so he was the head of of culture in that government.
And the archives, we could do a lot more to protect.
Yes, that is really for me. It's in this moment a political issue, because archives are one of the places where memory can be lost or retrieved. So where our understanding of our past can be developed and complexified, and where myths can be also dismantled in order to bring to the common sense new ideas and new understandings. And the archives of Goa, which for me they are a real treasure, not only for Goan history. I mean, they are a treasure for Goan history, but they are a treasure for Indian history or other history, because it has many things on Mozambique and all different places, because Goa was the center of the Portuguese Empire, Daman, Diu, elsewhere, Timor, many different places, Sri Lanka. They are in such a bad shape that it really breaks my heart when I go there and ask for a book and the book is just being destroyed. I open the book and the book destroys in front of me. Yeah, it is like that, and I don't understand why there is not a kind of public understanding on that, but political understanding on that. This politics of memory in Goa government, India government, I don't know how it works in India, but concerning these archives and the information that they can provide, it's inexistent. It's inexistent.
And not enough Goans using it. Not enough Goan students, young students.
No, because if I understood well, there was a time in the Goan University when these topics were also not very welcomed. The topics on the Portuguese rule.
I think, language and a whole lot of other issues.
Yeah, also.
But it also depends on mentorship and those kind of things.
Yes.
But on that note, without intending to be negative, really grateful to have you here, Dr. Ângela, and congratulations for all the work you've done. Your books are, widely noticed, and they are in all of our collections. Sometimes they become a bit too academic for us to read, but we get your point, and they are very important points. And even if they may be not very palatable, like the idea of Goa, to be told that you are created out of an idea which didn't exist, these are facts and these are very important, and we hope that you keep on going with many more of them so that we can learn more of our state, of your state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frederick, and really thank you for everything you do
Not at all.
for Goan culture, Goan history, Goan memory. So
Thanks.
thank you.